Welcome. This is like take 20 or something. Seriously, guys. I can't like keep a straight face. We're making an app that fetches Chuck Norris jokes. Like, how do you expect me to take this seriously? Alright, so what we're gonna do in this video is consume a Chuck Norris jokes API that gives us just that, and display these jokes, display the categories, and also allow the user to like and unlike them. And also, when you like them, they go here. Of course, you have to know what you liked, and you can also unlike what you already liked, of course. All right, you can also filter, remove the explicit ones or remove the nerdy ones. Yeah, you can do that. You can also scroll, and as you scroll down, I can't see it, but yeah, there you go. You see for a second a loading spinner, and then it loads more. All right, so yeah, you can also change the name, which is, you know, very important. I'm gonna change it to my name, so now it's Ahmed Norris. I'm gonna change it back because I don't want to offend Chuck Norris and his fans, which I'm one of them. All right, even though he's like 2 generations older than me or something. All right, so this is the API, the Internet Chuck Norris Database, which is a very creative name. And basically just gives us jokes that have the text and the ID and some categories. There's a couple of other endpoints that we'll get to later. We'll also use Material UI, which is React's implementation of material design. Oh yeah, did I mention we're going to be using React? Take 20, guys, take 20. All right, so we're going to be using Material UI to make the app look much better without having to write too much CSS, which is not the focus of this video anyway. All right, so enough jokes and UI and everything, and let's just get to the code. All right, so here on my desktop, I'm gonna create a folder. I'm gonna call it jokes. Open that with VS Code. And I'm gonna open the terminal and make sure you have the Create React App tool installed globally. If not, you can say npm install-g create react app, or just use npx. So here I'm going to say create react app dot, which will do just that, and I'm going to let it install, and I'll be back in a bit. All right, now that everything is installed, let's go to the source folder. Actually, let me straight away install Material UI. So let's say npm install at material-ui/core. And I'm going to delete a bunch of files that we're not going to use. So app CSS and app test, index CSS and index.js, the logo. Actually, no, index.js we keep. So, oops. Oh, I'm going to select them again. So select everything except the index.js and the app.js. All right, let's delete them. Yep, move them to the recycle bin. Cool. Let's remove the imports. So in the index.js, remove the service worker and the CSS file, and remove this service worker call. And in app.js, let's remove the CSS and the logo and save all files. Cool, all right. So in the terminal, let's run npm start, which will run the webpack dev server. And all right, so logo is not defined, so something is still being imported. Oh yeah, of course, this is not being imported. So I'm just gonna remove everything here. Just put like a header that says jokes. Save. All right, and that runs fine, and we see the header jokes. All right, let's actually start using some Material UI stuff to make it look nice. So here I'm gonna import. What do we import? So first thing, I'm gonna import something called CSS baseline. CSS baseline, and I'm gonna import also container, which is very similar to a Bootstrap container if you've used that before. So from Material UI/core, and here at the top of my app root div, I'm going to call CSS baseline. It's basically some normalized CSS stuff. It's kind of similar to Bootstrap's reboot if you're familiar with that. Here actually, instead of a header one, I'm going to use something else called typography, which is what Material UI tells you to use when you want to use any type of text in your app. So here I'll say typography, and this takes a variant, so let's give it a variant of header1, and let's give it a line of center so that it would go to the middle, and here inside of that it will say Chuck Norris jokes. Let me close this terminal because we're not going to need it anymore, and let's save. Let's look at our app, reload that just in case. Yep, and we get this massive header at the top, and if you notice, the background color as well has changed, and some other like tiny things have changed to normalize the CSS across the app. Alright, so here let's put everything in a container. So let's take this typography, cut it, and say container, close that, and inside of it paste the stuff back. And here let's actually start to put some markup. So first thing is I want to start to use the card. So let's actually first pull all the jokes from this API. So if we go back to the API page, and let's copy this, so this URL right here, and here let's import from React use effect, and here let's do a use effect call. So let's say use effect, and by the way, if you don't know what these hooks do, like the use effect and everything, I have a series on React hooks that you can check out. If not, you can just do this. So here we'll say we'll use the fetch API. So we'll pass it the we'll pass it, actually it copies it with a 1 for some reason, but we'll pass it this URL, but we need to say /jokes because that's where the jokes come from. And here we say .get .then, because this is already fetch with the URL is already a get, and returns a promise, so we say .then, and it gives us a response. And because of how fetch API works, we need to return the response.json. So we say res.json like this, and we chain another then, which will give us the actual results. So here we'll say let's just console log them, and so let's say console log res. And of course, we need to catch any errors if they happen. So error, console log that error. All right, let's save. Let's see what happens when we start the app. Or actually, I don't want to spam this API, so I forgot to add at the end of the call of the use effect, let's add an empty array of dependencies so that this only happens once. And let's go here. Let's open the DevTools. And here we go, we get a print with an object, and inside of it there's a type key that says success, and there's a key that says value, and which has all the jokes. Cool. Alright, the problem with this API is there's no pagination, so we get all the jokes in one payload, so we need to do that manually, we need to paginate. But before we do that, let's actually show these jokes. So from Material UI as well, we're gonna go here and import card, and I'll also import something else. So we have card content, and content, and here let's import card actions, and here under the title let's loop through the jokes, or actually I'm getting ahead of myself, we need to store the jokes. So here let's import use state, which is another hook that allows us to use the variables inside of our component that will change how the component renders. So here we'll say const, let's call this jokes, and this will be set jokes, say equals use state, and our state at the beginning would be an empty array. And here, as we get the results or response, remember the jokes are stored in value, so here we'll say set jokes, and we'll pass it res.value. So now the jokes will be stored in this jokes array. And here under the typography, we'll loop through them. So we'll say jokes.map, and for each joke, so say j, and we return. Going to be explicit about this actually and say joke, and we're going to return. If we go back actually here, we'll see, if we open here, see each joke has categories, an ID, and the joke itself. So we need to use that text. So we'll say card, and card, close that, and we'll use card content now. Content, and inside of that we'll just put a typography, and there we'll say joke inside of curly braces to put out the content of the joke inside of this card. So let's see what that looks like. CSS baseline is not defined. Is it not? We imported it. Okay, so I added an S somehow here. All right, my bad. Let's go back. There we go. So we get a bunch of cards, way too many of them, and they look horrible, but that's a start, I guess. Let's okay, so React is complaining that we didn't use the key prop, because each time in React when you loop through something and you return something, you need to give it a key just for React to index what this is, and this has to be unique. So let's just pass it. Let's assume for now that the jokes are unique, so we'll pass it the joke itself as the key, or actually let's pass it the ID. That's usually what happens. So now let's style this a bit, in a better way. Okay, we're gonna need to import something from Material UI. So let's say import. This is called make styles from at Material UI /core/styles. And this is one of the patterns they try to push when using styles. It's based on something called JSS, but it's basically writing CSS inside of JavaScript files and just assigning the classes. You'll see what it looks like. So here let's say const use styles equals make styles. And so inside of this make styles, we're gonna pass it the styles that we want, and it's gonna give us this use styles hook, which we'll use later inside the component to get our styles. So here we want to style the card itself, so the root element of the card. So here we'll declare card, and I want to give the content of the joke some padding inside. So actually, yeah, we do want to give it some padding, but I want to start first by giving margin for the card itself, because they're like attached to each other right now. So here we'll say, let's give it some margin on the bottom. So margin bottom like this, and we'll say 20. And also for the card content, so card content, this card content, we'll say give it some padding on all sides. So padding, oops, clicked something. So padding, and let's give it 5 rem. Oh no, actually 5 rem is too much. Let's just give it meant to give it 5 pixels. So let me close this terminal. Here, to use these, we need to, at the top of our component, we'll say const classes equals use styles, like this. And here we need to use these styles. So here for the card, we'll give it a class name, and this would be the classes.card. So you see inside of this classes, we'll get these, and we'll just pass them. It does some stuff in the background. It's not just a JavaScript file. Later in production, it's going to change class names, and it's going to do some optimizations behind the scenes that will make the performance for the app better. And for card content, let's give it a class name of classes.card content, like that. All right, let's save. Let's look at our app, and there we go. So we get some padding for the card content, and let's look at that. For some reason we get the padding only on the bottom. Why is that? Yeah, so okay, we don't get it just on the bottom, but by default the last element in the card has massive padding on the bottom, 24 pixels. So our padding is working just fine. We just need to increase the value of it. And for the margin, that's working just fine. So let's go back here, and actually let's give this 24 pixels. So it'll be 24 pixels on all sides. Let's look at that again, and that looks much better. All right, let's start to put the rest of the content of the card. So we need another element that we're going to use now is the button. So let's add button to the imports at the top, and here inside of card contents, actually not, we need actions. So here we'll say card actions, which will give us this section at the bottom where we can have, you know, what we can do with the card. So here we'll say button, and this will be the like button. So let's say like, and this will have a variant, and let's give it contain. There's a couple of different styles for buttons in material design, but contained seems to be the standard one that people use. Let's give it some a color, and there's by default there's default primary and secondary. I'm gonna give it primary, and for the unlike button, so let's do another button here, and inside of it it will say unlike, and let's give it a variant of contained as well, and let's give it the color of secondary. Let's save, and let's see what that looks like. Alright, so we get this red button. Let's actually change this to default. That's what I actually used when I made this, because you don't want to attract too much attention to the unlike button, because this is the focus. You want people to like more. Alright, so these buttons don't do anything for now, but they will in a moment. But one other thing we need to address is that let's just show 10 likes, or sorry, 10 jokes at the beginning, and then load more as the user scrolls, because this is way too much. So as we saw, this API gives us all the jokes at once, so we need to manually store them and like paginate ourselves. And we're not gonna paginate, but kind of chunk them into like smaller bits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this joke to be like the central storage for jokes, but I'm going to create another state variable. So let's do const, and I'm going to call this jokes to show. So it'll be just that, the jokes that we want to show on the view. So here we'll say jokes, set jokes to show, and this will be equals use state, and it will start as a empty array as well. And here, when we set the jokes, we set all of the jokes to our jokes array. And for jokes to show, we do set jokes to show, and we just take the first 10. So what we can do is we can say res.value, and we'll use the JavaScript method slice, and this takes a starting index and an ending index. So we want 10. Usually we'll say from 0 to 9, but the way slice works, it doesn't include the last element. So we'll say 0 to 10, and it will take 0 to 9, which is the first 10 elements. And now instead of using jokes down here, we'll say jokes to show and use those instead. All right, let's save. Now if we look at our app, we reload that, it just shows us 10. And if you look at, by the way, if you don't have React DevTools, I suggest you install the React DevTools for Chrome or for whatever browser you're using. Let's go to our app. And there you go. You see here in the state, there's this jokes array. There's the state variable that has all the jokes, and then there's this other state variable that has only the first 10. All right, so that's working. Next thing is, let's actually give this some padding because this looks a bit weird. All right, so let's go to the card actions. Let's give this a class. So let's say class name equals classes.card actions, which we don't have yet. So let's create it. So card actions. Let's give it some padding of, let's say, is it 24? Oops, in a string, 24 pixels. Let's look at our app. All right, that looks better, but the problem is this has now too much padding. So let's go back and change this to 5 pixels for the card content. Actually, for the card content, let's just give it padding on the bottom because it already has padding on the other sides. So here we'll just give it padding on the bottom, and we'll say, let's say 5. But actually, I don't know why I'm doing this. It should be just a number, because when it's just a number, it assumes that it's in pixels. And here I'll remove that and say, instead of 24, let's give it 16. And let's save that. All right, that looks better. We still have this gap, but we're gonna put some content later, which will make it look more balanced. All right, let's give these buttons something to do. So here for this button, give it an on-click event, and for this, it's gonna call a function called. So we'll give it like this as a callback, because so that it doesn't get called instantly. And we'll call this set like joke, and we need to pass it the joke ID so that it will know what this is. So we pass it like that. Let's copy that and go here, paste that, but instead of like joke, this will be unlike joke. Let's create these two functions. So here, say const like joke. We'll take an ID, and for now it's just gonna console log liking joke, and let's get the ID there. Let's copy that and change this to unlike, and here will be unliking joke. Alright, so if I go to the console, if I click on this, get liking joke 2, and here unliking joke 4. Alright, so those are wired. Of course, we're gonna give it more, actually wire the logic to actually like the posts, but for now, I wanna show the categories of the joke first. So for that, we're gonna use an element called chip, which is it looks like a tag. By the way, all of this is in the Material UI documentation if you want to, learn more and expand on that. So we import chip, and here inside of our joke, so here inside of our card, where do we put it? Actually, here at the top of the content, before the joke itself, we will open curly braces, and now we need to loop through the categories because that comes as an array. So here we'll say joke.categories dot map, and for each category let's call it cat, and the inside we need to return the chip. So here we'll say chip, and let's close that, and it will just say the category itself because that's just a string, it's not an object. Let's save that. Let's look. All right, so here it says each has to have a key. All right, but here the children is not fail prop type. The prop type children is not supported. Oh, okay, I made a mistake because the chip doesn't take the content as the child; it takes it as a prop. So here, let's close chip like that, and here we'll. I think it's a what is it? Yeah, it's the label. So here inside the label, we need to pass the category. And I'm gonna remove this closing tag because there's no children for this, and let's pass it that key. So here we'll say key, and it can be the category itself. All right, let's see what that looks like. All right, so we get for this one we get explicit, and for this as well. And I think if we look at the state, this API gives us some of them have most of them have no categories. So if it doesn't have a category, there's none. What we can do is, so here, we can do a conditional here. So inside of here, actually, let's cut all of this and let's say joke.categories dot length. If that's equal then 0. We do a ternary operator, so we do a question mark, and then we return. Now we paste that what we had, so we return this. If we do have categories, we're gonna show those chips with those categories. Else, we want to show a fake category that says regular. So we're gonna put another chip, or not another chip, an actual chip instead of none. So here we'll say chip, and this will have a label. And this will be hard-coded, and we'll say regular. And here, let's close the tag, and let's save. And let's see what that looks like. All right, so if we don't get any category, now it adds this regular. I'm gonna change the style of this because that looks not cool. So here we can give it a variant, and gonna do control space to see. Okay, let's give it the outlined one, and let's copy that from there to there, so that would be outlined as well. And there we go. That looks much better. Let's give it some. Let's give this some like spacing between the category and the thing, the text. We can actually use inline styling as well. So here we can write on both, just to show you that it works. So we can do style and open an object and say, let's give it a margin top of 10, and give it some margin bottom as well of 10 as well. Let me make this wrap. Ooh. Let's close that. Save. Okay, that looks much better. But of course, inline styling is something that's not recommended because, you know, just this. We have to write it twice. So we can actually customize this and make it into our own component. So I'm going to show you one way of like creating your own components. So here, actually not here, outside of the app component, we can create our own component. Let's call it category. And for this, we're going to use, actually we need to import something from Material UI called with styles. And this is a higher order component, which takes, so this will take some styles, and here say root. Root means this style applies to the topmost component inside of this component that we're going to pass later. So here we'll have the same styles. So actually let's just cut them from here. Let's just cut these and go up here, paste them. And here, this higher order components, we need to actually pass the component that we want to style, which is the chip. So now we're going to use this category instead of the chip. So here we'll change this from chip to category, and remove the styles, and keep everything the same. So remove the styles here. The label is the same, and this doesn't need a key. And here we'll say category. Let's save. And that works exactly the same as expected. So now the advantage is we can use category somewhere else, and we don't have to like the text here is like reduced, so the code looks a bit cleaner. It doesn't make perfect sense in this case, but for bigger apps it does actually make a difference. All right, so let's give some functionality to the like and unlike buttons. So before we do anything, I want to create another state variable here. So let's say const, and this will be our a collection of our liked jokes. So let's call this liked jokes, and we'll have a setter, set liked jokes, and this will say use state, and it will be empty, of course, at the beginning. So now when we click like joke, let's actually add that joke to that array. So here what we'll say is set liked jokes to or actually no, we need to check if it already exists in the array, because we don't want to add it twice. So here we'll say if liked jokes find joke where joke.id equals this ID that's been passed. So if this is the case, then we just return, we do nothing. And now if we get here, that means it doesn't exist in there, so we can just add it. And actually we need to get it first. So let's copy this and let's create a constant, let's call it liked joke, and paste that. So that's the joke, and now we add it to the array. So here we open an array and we spread the existing liked jokes because we don't want to remove them, and we add the new joke on top. Actually, let's add it from this side. Liked joke, so that it shows on the top. All right, so here for unlike, we're gonna do the same. I'm gonna check if if it exists, or actually we don't need to check. We can just filter out. So we can say liked jokes dot filter, and here we need to pass a filter. So our filter would be that joke. We only keep the jokes where the joke.id does not equal the ID that's been passed. So if we find one that has that ID, it's going to be removed. And actually we need to call our setter, because this wouldn't work. I mean, it would work, but it would not re-render the component because we didn't mutate the state. So here we'll bind this into a variable. Let's call this new liked jokes. Actually, no, that's too much. So just new liked jokes. Don't know why I put the equal there. And here we'll say set liked jokes to this new liked jokes. All right, that should work. And save that. And let's look at our app. All right, so we get this third state variable, the empty array, which is the liked jokes. And now if we click on this one, like, oh, we get undefined. All right, so let's check why that's happening. Oh, okay, that's a silly mistake. So here, instead of when we check that the liked jokes has that joke, here when we actually get the joke, we don't get it from liked jokes because that doesn't make sense because it doesn't exist there. So let's get it from the actual jokes array, which has all of them. And so here the same. Actually, not the same. Here, this stays the same because, yeah, we're filtering from the liked jokes array. All right, let's save that. And let's go back to our app. Now, if we click like here, there we go. We get that joke added into that variable. If we click this one gets added. And if we click again, it doesn't get added. So we can click as many times, it doesn't get added. So if I unlike the first one, and there we go, it gets removed. So now we have only 3 and 4. Cool. All right, so now what we can do next is we can show this array of liked jokes because, you know, you can only see it in the DevTools right now. So let's add those, the tab view thing here at the top. Okay, let's go up here and import a couple of things. So first it will be the app bar, which is basically like a nav bar. In material design, it's called that. So we also need tabs. Let's go down here, or maybe here, tab, and we need tab and tabs as well. So tabs, and I think that's it. Yeah. All right, let's go. Where do we put that? Yeah, let's put it here at the top. So here at the top, or actually no, let's put it under the title. So here under typography, we're gonna say tabs, and here it will take a value because this needs to know where we're at right now. And the value, let's say this is current tab, which we don't have yet, but we will create in a moment. Let's close that. We're gonna have 2 tabs. So here we'll say tab, and this will have a label. This has a label, which is the title. It's gonna be actually hard coded. So the first one will be our home view. So let's call it home, and let's give it an ID of home tab, and let's give it this for accessibility. This is recommended to use the area like variables by Material UI, so let's do that. So this will say area controls, and let's give this a name of home panel, which we'll use later. Oops, actually this will be a self-closing tag, and let's copy this, paste it one more time. This will be the likes tab, so likes, and here we'll say like tab, and here we'll say like panel. Alright, so under the app bar, we need to put the actual views that represent these tabs. So for this, we're going to use div, and here we need to pass it a role, and this will have the role of tab panel. And the thing is like about these 2 divs is that when we are in the home, we don't want to see the likes, and vice versa. So we need to put like a conditional for the property of hidden. So we give hidden, and this will be hidden if we're not in this tab. So we need to use the current tab index, which by the way I'm gonna set now. Let's go up here. No, actually here inside of the app, let's say const current tab, and set current tab equal use state, and by default I'm going to give it the value of 0, which will represent the home page. Right, so here, so this is the home, right? So this needs to be hidden if we're not in 0. So we'll say current tab does not, if current tab does not equal 0, so if this is, you know, the case, then it returns true, else it returns false. So this will be hidden if we're not there. So we need to put everything inside of this because this is the home page. So let's cut all this from here and move it up here. And now we need another div for the likes tab. So here we'll say div, same thing again. Role is, what is it, tab panel. Like that. And this will have as well the property hidden. And for this we'll check if current tab does not equal 1. And let's close that. And here let's just say for now like header 1 likes. And let's save that, see what it looks like. Alright, so we get our tabs here, but actually it's not working. Well, actually, yeah, we need to give the, I forgot to give this tabs, we need to give it an onChange event. So here we'll say onChange, and we'll give it a function called change tab. And yeah, just like that. Let's go up here, actually just here. My scroll speed is so fast for some reason. So let's create this change tab, which will take, because it's an onChange, it's going to take an event, which we're going to ignore, and a value. And what we're going to do, just call the set current tab with this value, which will change it to that. Okay, so that should work. So if we go to our app, all right, cool. So it's switching between the views. Now this is like really kind of attached to the first card. So let's give it some margin, and so it will be the app bar itself. Actually, we didn't use the app bar, did we? Oh, I'm supposed to put these in the app bar. Okay, so let's cut that and say app bar. And I was wondering why the styling didn't apply. So the tabs will be inside the app bar, and here I'm gonna give it some margin. So let's just give it some inline style and say margin bottom, and I'll give it 20 pixels and save. Alright, so the app bar is going to the top because by default it's fixed at the top. We can use a different variant. So is that variant? Oh, oops. Yeah, let's say variant, and no, actually it's not the variant. Must be something else. What is it actually? Forgot what it is. It's not. Oh yeah, it's the position. Sorry about that. All right, so let's see the suggestions. So we have fixed, absolute. Yeah, it's sticky. So sticky should be the one that, yeah, so it shows in its position, but as you scroll, it becomes fixed at the top. All right, so this is what I wanted. I want this as well to be centered in the middle. Believe we can just add a property of centered here. Let's save that. That's not working. Oh, sorry. Centered should go here. For the tabs, my bad. Oh, here. Man, I'm really rusty. All right, there we go. So we get the navigation buttons in the middle. But of course, inside of here, we need to show the likes. So inside of this tab, let's remove that and open curly braces. And now we need to do the same that we do here, but for like jokes. So we can actually just copy what's inside of here and adjust it. So Control C, copy that, and paste that here. And instead of showing jokes to show, we're gonna show liked jokes, and everything goes the same. Yeah, I think exactly everything's exactly the same. Let's just save that, and let's go here. Oops, that's not. Oh, of course I didn't like anyone yet. So there we go. So we get I like those two, and now they're added here. And if I click unlike, it's actually removed instantly. Cool. Now you can see that there's a lot of repetition here. So what we can do is we can extract the card into its own component. So actually I'm just gonna copy this card, or just cut it, and create a new component, create a new file here, call it joke card.js, say RFC, and gonna return that, and we're gonna need to get all the imports that we need for it. So it would be these three, actually these four. Remove them from there. Actually, don't remove them from there, just copy them. We'll see what we need after. So say import all of those from material UI, and save, let Prettier do its magic. And here, let's go here and import that card. So joke card, import joke card from same directory, joke card, card, like that. And here, inside of this, we're gonna say joke card. Actually, we need to pass the joke, so we can just pass it as a prop. So joke like that, and of course we need to give this a key because we're iterating through an array, and the key will be joke.id as well, same as earlier. Let's close that. Let's copy this and go from here to here, and paste that and save, and that should be good. But in the joke card we need to use those the prop. So here we can say props, and here instead of joke we say we don't need this key actually anymore, and we also need this class. So we're gonna have to bring in the styles. So let's actually do that. We could just copy what's inside of this and leave that alone, and come here and say import make styles. We're gonna need with styles as well, because we're gonna need to bring our category here. So from at material UI / core, and here we'll say const use styles equals make styles, do an object and paste that stuff in. And here we'll do the same as earlier, const classes equals use styles, like that. Let's also bring the category, so let's cut that and paste that here. And we need to import the chip for that to work. So here we'll say chip, comma, and remove this. We don't need it. Remove everything from here. Unused imports. So that should be fine. Actually, we need to pass these functions down. We can't just call them from inside of here, from the card, because we don't have access to the state variables up here. So we could just pass them as props. So here, I'm gonna click here and click here with Alt. So hold Alt and click here so I can write in both. And here we'll pass that function like joke as like joke, and we'll pass also unlike joke as unlike joke. All right, so that should be fine. So inside of here, inside of our component, we need to get those. Actually, you can destructure from the props. So we have the joke itself as an object, and we have the like joke function, and the unlike joke function. And actually everything could stay the same, I think, because yeah, everything could stay the same. Now if we call this function, it's gonna go up into the app.js and call it there. So let's save that. Let's save that. Let's see if we have any errors. Typography is not defined because, yeah, we need to import it here. So typography, save. All right, so it's running. All right, let's refresh. Cool, everything runs exactly the same. And now it's refactored, and our app.js file is much leaner than it was. One thing that we can start working on right now is the infinite scrolling, because right now if we scroll, nothing changes. So we want to make it so that when we get to the bottom, it loads more. Well, technically it's not loading more because we already have all the jokes, but we can just expand that array and add more to mimic that effect. You know, the key here is to learn how to do the detecting where if you're at the bottom of the content, and when you actually have an API that allows you to search for the next page, I mean query the next page, you can do that as well. And for that I'm going to use there's this brilliant article that I used a while ago for lazy loading images, but the same idea applies. So basically the concept here is that you're going to track an element. Actually, where is it? Scroll down here. The idea is that you're going to track an element. You're going to use something called an intersection observer. This is like using intersection API. You're going to track one element, and if you reach the bottom of it, then if you reach the bottom of an element, that means you've passed it. Or if you reach the top of another element, that means you've reached it in the view, and you need to render it. So it's a bit like convoluted, this implementation, but I'm going to try to simplify it. All right, so let's go to our app. So what we need to do, we need to track basically this card here, and as we scroll down, we need to detect whether we've passed it or not. So as we come here, we need to actually trigger something. Let me show you how it works. So if we go here inside, actually no, in the app.js, let's go here at the bottom, under change tab. I'm gonna use use effect, and let's do something, and let's pass as well like an empty array here, so it only executes once. Or actually, I need it to execute. I need to execute once all the jokes have already been shown on the view. So what I can do is remove that. I can call it from at the end of here once we set our jokes. Let me call it. I want to call it actually as a function. So here we'll say we need to look at that at that joke. Let's call it observe, because it's going to be using something called an observer, which I'll show you in a second. I say observe element. And we need to pass it an ID. Actually, no. Let me just call it like this, observe element. And let's declare this function. Const observe element. This will take nothing for now. I'm going to rewrite this, but for now it's going to be taking nothing. It needs to find the joke at the bottom. So we need to use an ID to get it. So what I'm going to do is here where we render our jokes, let's pass them some index to give them different IDs. So here I'm going to make this into like a code block, and inside the code block, actually let's use index. So give us like from 0 to whatever number we have. Now that we have that index, let's pass it to our card. So you'll say index equals index, and inside of the joke card, for each card, we're going to give it an ID. Actually, let's get that from destructure that from the props. So here add index, and here we'll say ID equals curly braces, backticks, and I'm going to say joke dash, and now $ curly braces to put the index in. So now each joke card will have an ID of joke dash the number. Okay, so here it says expected an assignment or function call, instead saw an expression. It's 969. Oh, here I need to return this. So return parentheses and do that. Now that should work. Cool. Right, so if we inspect our cards, so if we inspect this one, go to the top of the card. So you see this has ID joke 0, this has joke 1, etc. So last one is joke 9. So we need to actually find this last one and track it. So what we can do right now, so inside of the observe element, we need to create an observer. So here we'll say const observer equals new intersection observer, and for this takes a callback, and the callback takes entries, and the entries basically is an array of points within the object that we're going to observe, and they range from 0 to 1 as a float, 0 being the start of the element, and 1 being the 0, sorry, can be the bottom, and 1 could be the top of the element. So for this, we're going to use only one entry. So let's say if entries, so we can take one of the entries, and we only have one, so we'll say entries 0. We haven't created the entries, but I'll create it in a second. Is intersecting. So if that's true, that means we have reached that point. Here, let's just console log for now, say reached bottom of card. And here, for the second parameter or argument of this, we need to pass options, and the only option that we're going to use is threshold, and we'll pass 1. So this will mean like the bottom of the object. So now we need to observe our card, but we don't know which card to observe, so what we need to find it. So we'll say const bottom joke equals, we need to get from, actually we can't use the actual ID of the joke, because if we go back here, if we go to our state, even though these jokes have, okay, let me select the app, even though that these jokes have IDs, their IDs are actually like, there's like here from, for example, from between 6 and 12, it's missing, so it's not actually an integer that's incrementing properly. There's like some gaps. So what we need to use, that's why actually I use the index here. So it will be, all of them will have a perfect, like from 0 to whatever number of jokes there is. So the bottom joke will be, so we need to get the last joke in our jokes to show. So actually we need to get the ID. So the ID, let's call this bottom joke ID, and this will be joke dash, and the last one will be, let's do $ jokes to show dot length -1. So at the beginning, the length of jokes to show is 10, and -1 is 9. Joke dash 9 will be the bottom one, as we saw earlier. So that's the ID. We need now to get the element itself. So let's say const bottom joke L for element will be document document dot get element by ID, and we'll pass it the bottom joke ID. Now that we have the element itself, we need to observe that element. So here we'll say our observer that we just created dot observe, and we pass it that joke. All right, let's save. Let's look at our app. Let's look at the console. Okay, so failed to execute observe, and that's not an element for some reason. Maybe because, oh, okay. This is being executed there. Let's actually console log this our bottom joke. So here we'll say clg bottom joke element, and so we get null because it's console log RD. Okay, so I made a mistake here. So this will be joke. Oh, hang on, that's strange. Why is it underscore on dash dash? Okay, so jokes to show that length -1. Okay, let's say const index equals that. And just in case, we just console log that index, and we pass the index here. Oh, so that's -1. It wasn't being found because Oh, okay, makes sense. All right. Yeah, that's the problem. One problem with like the use state setter. It's not always not just because we called set jokes to show here, that means like they will be ready for this function. Sometimes there's this weird delay that that happens. Well, actually all the time. So it's kind of asynchronous in a way. We can get around that by using useEffect, making sure that all the jokes have loaded already, and doing some preventative coding here. So what we can do is let's go here. Say, or actually let's go on top of it. Oh, actually no, we need to, let's go here because otherwise it's not gonna recognize it. So here we'll say useEffect, and it's not gonna take anything. And here we need to obtain that bottom joke. So let's say const bottom joke. We can actually concatenate all that logic into one line. So bottom joke, bottom joke element should be document.getElement by ID, and straight away we're gonna use the where is it? The jokes to show length -1. That will be actually joke dash and concatenate with $ curly brace that, and that should get the correct joke. But at the beginning this will be null. But let's actually call this function. So observe element. We need to pass it our bottom joke like that. So here this needs to take the bottom joke like that. And what we can do here, we can say if bottom joke equals null, then we just return. Else we carry on, we create our observer, and we need to here. So let's copy that. Instead of observing that, we observe this, and we can just get rid of all of this here, make it look much leaner. And here for our dependencies for useEffect, let's add jokes to show as a dependency. So each time this changes, it will execute again. So the idea is that now at the beginning, jokes to show will be empty. This will execute. It will get this element, which is null, call observe element. That will stop because it's null, which is fine. Once we populate the jokes to show, this will execute again, and we'll actually find the bottom joke and call observe element, which will then work. All right, let's save. Let's see if that actually works. Let's reload. Still get failed to execute observe on intersection observer. Okay. Bottom joke is fine. Okay, let's just console log this. Let's see what we get. We get that div with the ID. Okay, so actually it is working. So as you can see, if I scroll to the bottom, once we reach the bottom of that card, it says reach bottom of card. But for some reason, there's here at the beginning, it's observing. It's trying to execute it even though it's null. So that shouldn't get to that call as it's printing null. Let's console log the bottom joke and just do another console log here. Passed null, check just to make sure. Okay, so null, 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 undefined. Okay, that's the problem. If it's undefined, it still goes through. So we can just say if not. Not. That should do the trick, I think. Let's save, reload. Yeah, cool. So even if it's undefined, it's not going to go through. All right, so that's working. So no error. All right, let's remove these console logs from here. and from here as well. Now we don't just want to observe it when we get to the bottom. So once, as you saw, when we get to the bottom, this block right here gets executed. So inside of here, this is where we do the logic for adding jokes to the page. So we can call another a function here, so that to keep this lean, say call it add more jokes, and let's put this on top of here. Yeah, here say function, or actually we could just use const to stay consistent. Add more jokes will be function, and here we can just take that array, the original array, and take from it and add onto the jokes to show. So we can say set jokes to show to jokes, so the main jokes array that has all the jokes. And now we need to take a slice again from 0 to what we need to do now. We need to add to the length of the existing jokes to show. So we can say jokes to show dot length plus 10. So if we already have 10, we're gonna take 20. If we have 50, we're gonna take 60, etc. So this should this should work. And as this is a state variable, it's gonna re-render and it's gonna add more jokes. All right, so we refresh, no errors, and I'm gonna ignore these for now. And as I scroll down, boom, it's actually adding more. So if I hit the bottom, boom, it's adding more. You see the scroll bar is going back up. But let's actually make it mimic an asynchronous call. So I want to show that loading spinner at the bottom. So let's actually create that loading spinner. For that, we're going to use a material UI component called circular progress, which is just a spinner. And here, let's here at the top, my scroll speed is really fast. Say const create our own spinner or a function, because that's the tradition when you create a actual component. And this will return. I want to put it inside a wrapper that centers it. So let's give it a div with a style of, let's give text align of center, and let's give it some padding of 2 rem, like that. And inside the div, we're going to have our circular progress, and it's going to be self-closing like that. And now we need to show the spinner when we're loading. Speaking of loading, I need to create a state variable. So here, let's say const loading and set loading equal use state, and it's going to start with false. And let's go, actually we need to go in the markup. So here at the bottom, after all the jokes, but inside the tab still, here we'll say we'll do a ternary if we're loading. So loading question mark, we show the spinner component that we just created. Or actually there's no other thing if we're not loading, so we just say end. If we're loading, we just show the spinner, close that tag, and we need to set loading. So where's add more jokes? Where are we? I'm getting lost in my own code. All right, so here at the top, we need to set loading to true. Now I want to mimic some delay because it's going to be instant, because you know there's no actual async call. So I'm going to use set timeout, and this takes a timeout in milliseconds. Let's give it 400 milliseconds, almost half a second. And we set loading to true, and then we wait 400 milliseconds, and then we do add the jokes. And let's put that here, move that inside, and when we add the jokes, we set the loading to false so that the spinner goes away. All right, let's save and make sure there's no errors. Cool. Let's go to our app, refresh. I know I'm refreshing, it's actually hot reloading. Actually, let me make this a bit smaller because it's massive. Right, let's go here for our title. Just change that variant to header 2, even though technically you should have a header 1 at the top of every page for SEO, but you know, it's not a production app. Save that. Alright, looks better, but I want to give it some margin, so I'm just gonna put some inline styling here. Let's give it some margin of 20. Alright, that looks better. Alright, so yeah, so as we scroll now, we should see a loading spinner. Cool, and we get a loading spinner, and then we get more jokes loaded. And then we scroll down. Alright, nice. So it's showed in loading spinner and loading more. But there's one other problem that you might not be able to see here. So let me go here. So in the observer, before we add jokes, let's console log say adding more jokes. Now let's do that. Now, once we scroll past that bottom joke, it says adding more jokes, and then it does it again, which is not a problem. But if we go back up and now we go down, it's going to say that again and again and again. Now that's not good. We don't want to keep tracking the initial bottom joke. We want to make it so that once we switch to the next bottom joke, we want to like remove the observer from the first one, because it's highly inefficient. It's going to create so many events in the background, and you know, it's not good. All right, so what we can do here is really simple actually. Now, when we have passed this, we create our observer, we observe here, and once that event is triggered and we get inside of here, we can simply detach it here by saying observer.unobserve, and we pass that same bottom joke. And let's save that. Now let's go back. So as we scroll, we get adding more jokes, and it adds more. But if we go back up and we go down past the same first bottom joke, it doesn't say that anymore. And now here it says that for this one. And now if we scroll back up, it's actually detaching from the previous one. All right, so that's fixed. Let's remove this console log. Now let's add the filters. So for that, I'm going to use another endpoint that's here. We can actually loop through the jokes that we have and get all the categories, but we can just leverage another endpoint that's here. Where is it? Yeah, here. Not this, sorry. Yeah, this one. So /categories, which gives us a list of all categories, which in this case is only like, there's only explicit and nerdy, I think. But you know, it's we prove the concept. So before we load the jokes, or after we load the jokes, actually, here, actually we don't need to call this anymore. Here, after we set the jokes, we can, or actually outside of the promise, we can, you know, simultaneously fetch them. So we can say fetch, and let's just copy this and paste that there. And instead of jokes, we're going to fetch categories. Oops, like that. And then, what did I do? Then res, we return response.json, and we chain another then. Now when we get the results, we need to set them to an array of categories, which let's create here. Here at the top we can say const categories and set categories equals use state, and this is going to be initially an empty array. And here when we get them, we'll say set categories to res.value. And of course we do .catch. If there's an error, we console log that error. And now we're going to get those categories. Let's actually show an input, like a checkbox, so that when you select it, it shows that, and when you deselect it, it doesn't show it. So actually inside the tab, right about above the jokes themselves, let's actually put a comment here, say joke cards, And here we put another comment. We say category filters. So here we'll loop through them. So categories dot map, and for each category, for each category we're gonna return something. And here we need actually to import two more things. So here I'm gonna import form control label, and we need also the checkbox from Material UI. And where are we? We're here. So here I'm gonna put the way that it works. The label surrounds the input that's inside of it, which in this case is a checkbox. So here, because we're inside the loop, we give a key, and the key would be the category itself. Let's actually be explicit and call this category, like that. And here this takes an object or a prop called control, which will have the actual child component inside of it. And in this case, it's a checkbox. And this checkbox will have a name, and the name of it will be the category itself. And it will, let's give it a color of primary. Let's close that, and actually we need to close this. Let's save, see what that looks like. Okay, we don't get the label. That's because, oh, actually this, no, I forgot to give the label to this. So after control, we also give label, and this should be category. Oops, category. Let's save. Alright, there we go. So we get the label in front. But of course, now when these change, nothing is happening. So we need to give them an onChange event. So here, onChange. Let's call this toggle category. And we need to also give them a value. Oops. Value. Oh, sorry, checked, because this is a checkbox, and the checked will be let's actually see through our categories. If that has the current category, then it is checked. Else it isn't. So we can say category though includes this category. Sorry, actually not categories, because this will always have all the categories. Let's create a new state variable. Let's call this filter categories, which will be our customly selected categories that we want to filter by. So we need to create both of those. So up here, where are we? Here we can add under categories, we can add const filter categories and set filter categories to use state initially going to be empty. So once we fetch the categories, we want to set them and also set filter categories by them as well. By default, we want to be showing all the categories. And then now we need to create the other function that toggles the filter category. So here we'll say const toggle category, and this this will take an event and a value. And here we need to check if our filter categories has this category or not. So here we can say const category equals yeah, actually we need to use the event object. Actually, we're not gonna get any value because everything is inside the event already. So event dot target dot name, the name of the input that we gave here will be the category itself. So now that we have the actual category, we need to check in our filters. So we'll say if it does exist, then we're going to remove it, else we're going to add it. So if filter categories dot includes this category, then we need to add it. So actually need to make a copy of our filter categories. So filter categories copy equals array and spread the existing filter categories. And now we need to, actually, sorry, here we need to remove them. We need to remove it because it's actually found. So we need to find the index of it. So here we can say const category index equals filter category copy dot index of, and here we just pass the category because it's actually just a string. It's not an object. We don't need to pass like another function that has a condition. So now once we find it, we're gonna find it for sure because we already did this check. So here we'll say filter categories dot splice, and we're gonna splice from the index, so category index, and we're gonna splice one element because we're just gonna remove that one category. And now we're gonna set filter categories to this categories filter categories copy. Sorry, I'm confusing myself here. All right, so that's if we find it, we remove it. Else, if we don't find it, we could just simply say set filter categories to an array of the existing categories, so the existing filter categories, and we add this category that has been passed. Let's add a comment here for clarity. If found, then remove, else add it. All right, so that should work. So now if we click any of them, it should trigger this toggle category, which is here, and it should do this logic properly. Let's look at our app. Let's look at our state, so components. And all right, see, this is the categories and this is the filter categories. And now they're both selected. So if I unselect nerdy, there we go. Actually, that's the filter categories is above the categories. And if I unselect explicit, this should disappear and all the explicit ones should disappear as well. So if I unselect that, there's an error. Oh, actually that was gone. That's strange. That was not supposed to happen. All right, why is that happening? Oh, okay, because here I'm splicing straight away from the state variable, which is a big no-no. So here we'll say filter categories copy dot splice, and then assign that using the set filter categories. Actually, let's change the order here. Actually, the order is fine. I don't know why the other one is appearing before. Maybe because we're setting it before. Strange. All right, let's refresh. Let's go back again. So we see our categories there. We unselect nerdy, and nerdy is gone. Actually, now the order is actually fixed. Okay, so now if we unselect explicit, nothing changes. All right, let's check why that's happening. Oh, okay. Of course, I know why. Because we haven't added logic that checks for the categories, of course. Because here we're just looping through all of them. Duh. All right, let's actually add that logic. Okay, the way we're going to do this is inside of here, we're going to check if this joke has one of the categories that we have in our filters. Now, this is a bit too complicated to put inside of here. So let's create a function for it. I'll show you why it's actually... because we're comparing an array, finding an object from an array in another array, if that makes sense. So here we can just add a check for a function that doesn't exist yet. Let's say if category match, and we pass it this joke object. So if it matches, then so we can just put that inside of curly braces. Then we return that. Else we do nothing. We proceed to the next one. So let's create this category match function. So up here, just a bit before the return or anywhere else, we can say const category match equals. This is actually going to take the. Actually, let's make it take the categories themselves. So we can say, where are we? So right here, if category match jokes dot categories, because we don't need the not comma. We don't need the whole object itself. So this will take joke categories, and you will do the following. So now we need to find inside of our inside of our filter categories, if they have any of these categories. So for example, if we have a joke that has nerdy, and in our filters we have nerdy and explicit, like that, we need to loop through this and we need to find whether it has any of these. And once we find one, we just return immediately. We don't need to compare all of them. So for this, I'm going to use the good old for loop. So we say for let I equals 0, I smaller than joke categories dot length, because we need to loop through them, and I plus plus, that means it's incrementing, of course. So now we'll say if if filter categories that we have includes the current index, so we'll say includes joke categories I. If it does, then we immediately just return true. We don't need to continue looking. Now, if we get here after the for loop, that means no return true happened. That means we didn't find anything, so we'll return false at the end here. So this will check if this joke has one of the categories that we have in our filter. All right, let's save. Now, oh, okay, I see another problem appears here, which is that the other ones that we assigned regular actually have an empty array of categories. So we can get around that by saying here, if category match, or if it doesn't have any categories, so or joke.categories.length equals 0. And here we do like the two pipes signifying or. So if it doesn't have any categories, that means it's a regular joke. We show it anyway. Or if it matches the category filters, then we show it. So if we go back, there we go. We get explicit, regular, and if we go down, we'll get the nerdy ones as well. So nerdy there. Now if I unselect explicit, there we go. So the explicit ones are actually gone from the view. And if I unselect nerdy, and if I do, Control F and search for nerdy, we don't find any. And if I select again, we will go down and we should find some more nerdy ones. There we go. Cool. So the filtering is working. The likes is working. One thing, actually, I want to add something to the likes. So as we click here, we don't get any indication that we're adding, that they're being liked. But if we go, we see them. So I want to add a number here, which is in material design called a badge. So let's actually add that. So we need to go to the top and import that. So import badge from material UI, and here this tab, this needs to be this needs to have a badge in it. But the way that works, this either takes a string or it takes an element. So this label, I'm gonna remove that and do curly braces. And inside of here, we're actually going to have our badge. So badge, and the badge will have, I'll give it a color of secondary. So it was going to have that red that contrasts with the blue. And this takes badge content. And here the content should be, we don't want it to show anything if we don't have any likes. So here I'll check for liked jokes .length. If that's bigger than 0, we want to show that length. So if that's bigger than 0, we do a ternary, so a question mark, liked jokes.length will be the value, else we're going to return null, which will not show anything. And let's close that tag. And inside the badge, we're going to have the word likes, which is going to show inside of this tab as the text of the tab. So now we save that, we go to our app, we see likes, nothing has changed. But if we like a joke, there we go, we get the badge here, number 1, 2, 3. And if we go here, we unlike any, the actual number changes. And if it goes back to 0, the badge goes away and it has some nice animation. All right, so that's sorted. One more thing actually that we need to do to complete this app is to leverage another endpoint here. It's right here, changing the name of the main character. So this API allows us to add a first name and a last name and change the name of Chuck Norris to our own name. So let's do that. So let's go, where do we go? Here, above the filters, let's add a form. And inside this form, we're going to use some inputs, but we'll use actually material design inputs, which are called text fields. So let's import text field like that, and let's go down down here. So here we'll have the first text field, so text field, which will be the first name, and here we'll have an ID, first name, label of first space name. Oh, was typed space, and what else? Actually, a value. I'm actually starting to brain fart. An onChange function that will take an event, and we will call a setter that we don't have yet for first name. So set first name, and we'll set it to the event.target.value. Let's close that. We can copy that one more time because the other one is pretty much identical. So here, instead of first name, let's select all of those and change them to last, camel cased, last name. But here we need to change this to capital L, and here we'll change this to last name. That looks good, and the form needs to have an onSubmit event. OnSubmit, and that will be, what do you call it? Let's call it change name. Change, did I misspell that? Yeah, I spelled that correctly. And let's give this a no validate. So we do a validation ourselves. And yeah, that looks fine. Let's save, and let's create all these state variables and setters. So here, under the tab stuff, we'll say const first name and set first name equals use state empty string. We can just copy this one more time and change this to last name. Change that to capital L. Now we need to create the change name function for the form. So here, const change name will take an event. Actually, it doesn't even need to take the event because we have the values in the state. Here we can do some really basic validation. We can say if first name equals an empty string, or last name equals an empty string, then we're just gonna return. I'm not gonna call anything. Else we're gonna fetch the data again, but with our names that we gave. Actually, one optimization that we can do is, I don't want to at the beginning fetch with this endpoint and then fetch with the other one, like adding more code. So we can outsource the fetching the data to its own function, and I'll show you why I want to do that. So here we can have just under here, can use a function called, let's call it fetch and set jokes, and this will do exactly the same as that. So actually we need to call it at the beginning, so we call it like that. And actually here we can use the loading as well. We can set loading here to true so that we can see that spinner at the beginning. And once everything is done loading, we can go here, set loading to false, and here as well we can set loading to false once everything is set. We don't need to set loading at the beginning here because it's already set before it's called, so we can leave that like it is. But the key change here is that we can at the beginning use the other add the other fields as well, the first name and the last names, that we don't have to call two different endpoints. The caveat is here we're gonna call it with the first name of Chuck and the last name, or actually we can use the state variables, initialize them as Chuck Norris. So here we change these to backticks, and the first name will be first name, and we do and we add the last name as well, which will be $ curly brace last name, like that. And of course these need now to be initialized with Chuck Norris in them. So here we'll say Chuck, and for the last name we'll say Norris. Okay, so now at the beginning we're gonna call them with that, which is just the normal behavior. But once we change them and we submit that form, we need to trigger that function again. So we'll say fetch and set jokes again, like that. And that should do the trick. All right, let's save. Okay, this looks horrible. So let's give this form some styles. I'm gonna give it a class name of classes.form, which doesn't exist. So let's create that up. Where are we? Actually, we need to use styles again. So here we'll say form. So I want to give it align everything like kind of space out thing. So we can give this a display of flex and say align items, and align items to the center, and we can justify content as well to center. All right, let's save. That looks better, but actually I forgot that I need to add a button to submit that form. Let me add that first. So let's go here in our form. So here let's add a button that says submit, and this will have a type of submit so that it submits the form. Let's give it a variant of primary, or color, sorry, of primary. Okay, let's check it out. Our button is not defined because we removed the import. So here, let's underneath here, let's bring button again. Let's save. Let's change this to contained. So right here. So the yeah, we did actually need the variant. So variant contained, and all right, that looks cool. So let's go back up. I want to give them like some margin between those inputs. So here, where we style the form, we can do a string and say and space bigger than and star, which means any element that's nested right under this tag. And let's give them some margin of 20. Let's look at that. Alright, that looks better. Let's make them take like an equal amount of width. So let's say width 25 ch. Alright, so that's cool. It makes the button bigger. I think I kind of like that a bit more. I feel like this button is not aligned properly. So let's inspect that. I think we need to wrap our div, our form rather, in a div and align those items to the center. So let's go here. Well, we saw the form is here. I'm just gonna cut it, put a div here. I'm just gonna put some inline styles. You can optimize it and put everything up in the styles. Here we'll say flex, display flex, display of flex. Let's give it a flex direction of column. And here we need to say justify content to center, and that should align the button properly. Alright, there we go. So now the button is aligned properly with the input. Alright, let's check if this is working. So I'm going to change it to my name. So Ahmed Paju, submit, and there we go. It's actually, oh, all right. So it's changing the content, and then for some reason calling. Oh, okay. I know why. It's refreshing the page because I didn't add here. I didn't add. Actually, this should take the event of the form and prevent default, because that's what's refreshing the page. So prevent default like that. Now that should work. So if I change this to my name again, so Ahmed, submit. Cool. So it actually sends a another request to the API. So if we switch to the network, switch to XHR, we see that we send at the beginning jokes with the values first name, last name, Chuck Norris, and then if I change the name, like let's do John Doe, submit, you see that it sends another request with John Doe and gets that. So we get John Doe here. All right, so that's that for this. Sorry for a bunch of hiccups that happened. I'm really rusty, haven't made a video in a while. Please let me know in the description if you'd like me to do more material UI stuff, more API consumption stuff, and please smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. And the code will be in the description, and also the link for the article that shows you how to use the intersection API stuff as well will be in the description. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again soon. Bye.